On November 14, 1987, Dr. Harold Aldrich filed his last quarterly report with the Harmon County Medical Board. He'd been filing them for 31 years, same format, same meticulous handwriting, same unremarkable statistics. At 6:15 that evening, the lights in his Main Street practice went dark for the final time. The county ruled it a simple retirement, case closed in 4 days. But they didn't explain why 847 children in his patient files showed identical growth measurements across decades. They didn't explain why photographs from 1958 matched photographs from 1979. And they didn't explain why Dr. Aldrich's patients, according to every metric in his own careful records, stopped aging in 1962. Ruth Kemper had been cataloging medical archives for the State University for 19 years. She'd processed tuberculosis records from mining camps, polio vaccination logs from the 1950s, dental surveys from rural schools. Nothing surprised her anymore. Or so she'd believed until the Aldrich files arrived in 3 cardboard boxes, donated by his estate after his death in 1989. She was 54 years old, methodical by nature, and she kept a spiral notebook beside her workstation where she recorded anomalies. The notebook filled faster than any she'd used before. The first box contained patient intake forms from 1956 to 1969, standard pediatric records, height, weight, vaccination dates. Ruth began entering them into the university's new database system, the cursor blinking green on her black monitor screen. By the 3rd hour, she'd stopped typing. Ruth pulled 3 folders from the box. Different patients, different years. Tommy Breslin, age 7, examined March 1958. Height, 48 inches. Weight, 52 pounds. Carol Ann Whitmore, age 7, examined September 1961. Height, 48 inches. Weight, 52 pounds. David Nestor, age 7, examined June 1967. Height, 48 inches. Weight, 52 pounds. She checked the handwriting. Same pen, same pressure, same slight leftward slant on the number 4. She pulled more folders. Age 8, 50 inches, 57 pounds. Age 9, 52 inches, 63 pounds. Age 10, 54 inches, 70 pounds. The same numbers, the same handwriting, repeated across hundreds of files, spanning 3 decades. Ruth removed her glasses and cleaned them on her sweater. Then she opened her spiral notebook and wrote, Aldrich files, data fabrication, check methodology. The photographs were worse. Aldrich had been thorough, a Polaroid stapled to each file. The child posed against the height chart painted on his examination room wall. Ruth spread them across her desk in chronological order. 1958, 1963, 1969, 1974, 1981. Different names, different dates. The same 7-year-old face stared back at her from every photograph. She told herself it was a filing error. Someone had mixed up the photographs, attached the wrong images to the wrong records. It happened in old archives. But the height charts behind each child showed the same water stain in the upper left corner, the same crack in the paint at the 42-inch mark, the same examination table visible at the edge of every frame. Ruth picked up her phone, then set it down. Who would she call? What would she say? Ruth drove to Harmon County the following Saturday. It was a 4-hour trip through flat farmland, the highway cutting between harvested cornfields and grain elevators. She'd told her husband she was visiting a cousin. The lie came easily, which bothered her. Aldrich's former office sat between a hardware store and a pharmacy on Main Street. The windows were papered over. A for lease sign faded in the door. Ruth parked across the street and watched the building for 20 minutes before she approached it. The door was unlocked. Inside, the waiting room still held its final chairs, arranged in rows against wood-paneled walls. Dog-eared magazines from 1987 fanned across a low table. Dust covered everything. Ruth's footsteps echoed on the linoleum as she walked toward the back, toward the examination room she'd seen in hundreds of photographs. The examination room was exactly as the photograph showed. Height chart painted on the wall, water stain in the upper left corner, crack at the 42-inch mark. Leather-topped examination table, glass-fronted instrument cabinets, growth charts yellowing on a corkboard. Ruth stood where Aldrich had stood, holding his camera. She could see exactly how he'd framed each shot. She photographed everything with her own camera, a 35mm Pentax her son had given her for Christmas. 24 exposures. Then she opened the instrument cabinets. Empty. She tried the filing drawers beneath the examination table. Locked. Ruth knelt and examined the lock. Standard medical cabinet hardware, the kind any hospital supply company carried. She brought a screwdriver. The drawer contained more patient files. Duplicates, Ruth assumed at first. But the names were different. The measurements were different. These children grew. Their heights increased by 2 or 3 inches each year. Their weights fluctuated naturally. Normal pediatric records, the kind Ruth had cataloged thousands of times. She compared a file from the drawer to a file from the donated boxes. Tommy Breslin, 1958. The drawer copy showed him at 47 inches and 49 pounds. The donated copy showed 48 inches and 52 pounds. The drawer copy had a different photograph, same child, but standing naturally, looking at something off camera. The donated copy showed him posed stiffly against the height chart, eyes fixed on the lens.
2 sets of records. He kept 2 sets.
Ruth spent 3 hours in the abandoned office, photographing every document she found. The drawer contained records for 43 patients, all with normal growth patterns. The donated boxes contained records for the same 43 patients, plus 800 more, all with identical measurements. She was loading her final roll of film when she heard the front door open. Office is closed. Has been for 2 years. Ruth turned. A man in his 60s stood in the examination room doorway, wearing a deputy sheriff's uniform that strained across his stomach. His badge read, Harmon County, but she couldn't make out his name.
You're not from around here.
I'm from the State University. Medical Archives. We received Dr. Aldrich's files.
That's so.
He didn't phrase it as a question.
University sent you 4 hours to look at an empty building?
I wanted to see where the records came from. Context helps with cataloging.
Context.
He walked into the room, his boots heavy on the linoleum. Ruth noticed he kept his right hand near his belt, though not on his weapon.
Dr. Aldrich was a good man. 30 years he took care of folks here. Delivered half the babies in the county. Never charged what he could have.
I'm sure he was well respected.
He was. And after he passed, his family wanted his records preserved. That's why they went to the university, so they'd be safe.
The deputy stopped beside the examination table. He looked at the open drawer.
Find anything interesting?
Just more patient files. Duplicates of what we already have.
The deputy nodded slowly. He didn't look at the drawer.
Building's private property. Aldrich Estate still owns it. You'd need permission to be here.
The door was unlocked.
Doesn't mean you're invited.
Ruth gathered her camera and bag. Her hands were steady, but her pulse wasn't.
I apologize for the intrusion. I should have contacted the family first.
You should have. Where are you staying tonight?
I'm driving back. My husband expects me.
The deputy stepped aside to let her pass. As she reached the waiting room, he spoke again.
Those files at the university. They're historical records now. Ought to stay that way. History doesn't need updating.
Ruth didn't answer. She walked to her car without looking back. Back at the university, Ruth developed her photographs in the history department's darkroom. She hung them to dry on a line above the chemical trays. 36 images of Aldrich's examination room and the documents she'd found. Then she began cross-referencing. The donated files listed 847 patients. The drawer files listed 43. Ruth entered both sets into her database and ran a comparison. Every drawer patient appeared in the donated records, but with different measurements, different photographs. The remaining 804 patients in the donated files had no drawer counterparts. Ruth pulled their folders. Same handwriting as the rest. Same poses against the height chart. Same measurements. 48 inches and 52 pounds at age 7. 50 inches and 57 pounds at age 8. On and on. The same numbers repeated like a mantra. Ruth found the first address in a Harmon County phone book from 1965. The Breslin family had lived on rural Route 4. She called the number. Disconnected. She tried directory assistance for current listings.
I have a Thomas Breslin on Maple Street in Harmon.
Ruth dialed. A woman answered.
Hello, I'm calling from the State University. I'm trying to reach Thomas Breslin, who would have been born around 1951.
That's my husband. He's at work. What's this about?
We're cataloging historical medical records, Dr. Harold Aldrich's patient files. I had a few questions about...
Tom doesn't talk about that.
The line went dead. Ruth stared at the receiver. She'd expected confusion, maybe mild interest. Not that. Ruth called 6 more families that week. 3 numbers were disconnected. 2 people hung up when she mentioned Aldrich's name. One elderly woman, grandmother of a patient named David Nestor, agreed to speak with her. Mrs. Nestor. David's doing fine. Lives in Chicago now. Accountant.
I'm glad to hear it. I had a question about his medical records. There seemed to be some inconsistencies in the files Dr. Aldrich kept. Mrs. Nestor. Inconsistencies? The measurements don't quite match what we'd expect. And the photographs? Mrs. Nestor. Dr. Aldrich was a careful man. If there are problems with the records, they must have happened after he donated them. The records came directly from his estate. Then I don't know what to tell you.
That's what mattered thee.
Ruth returned to the archive basement and began a different kind of search. She pulled insurance records from Harmon County, claims filed with the state medical board between 1956 and 1987. Standard procedure for rural practitioners. Aldrich had filed thousands of claims for routine pediatric care. Each claim listed the service provided, the patient's name, and the date. Ruth cross-referenced them with the patient files. The services matched. The dates matched. But when she checked the billing codes, she found something odd. Every examination, regardless of the child's actual condition, was coded as comprehensive pediatric evaluation, the highest reimbursement category. Every single one.
800 patients, 30 years. Every visit billed at maximum rate.
She pulled her calculator from her desk drawer and began adding. The numbers were staggering. Aldrich had billed for approximately 24,000 comprehensive pediatric evaluations over 3 decades. At 1987 rates, each evaluation paid $85. But the rate had been lower in earlier years. $40 in the 1960s, $60 in the 1970s. Ruth calculated backwards. Total billings, approximately $1.4 million. For a rural practice in a county with a population under 12,000. Ruth checked the census records. Harmon County had never had more than 900 children under 18 at any given time. Aldrich's files showed 847 unique patients, nearly every child in the county for 3 decades.
He saw every child, every year, and billed maximum for every visit.
She sat back in her chair. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Something was wrong with this picture, but she couldn't yet see what. Ruth drove to the state medical board offices in the capital. The building was a concrete block from the 1960s, its corridors lined with institutional green paint and bulletin boards covered in licensing notices. She'd called ahead, identifying herself as a university archivist with questions about historical billing practices. A clerk named Donna Kramer met her in the records room. She was perhaps 40, with reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and the patient demeanor of someone who spent her days answering questions no one else wanted to answer.
You're asking about Harold Aldrich, the Harmon County doctor.
You know the name?
Everyone in this office knows that name. He was audited twice. Both times, the auditors came back with nothing.
Nothing? His billing pattern is statistically impossible. Every visit coded at maximum reimbursement.
That's what the first auditor said. In 1969. Then he went to Harmon County to review the actual patient files.
And?
He came back and said the documentation supported every claim. Comprehensive evaluations, properly conducted, properly recorded.
What about the second audit?
Donna walked to a filing cabinet and pulled a folder. Her movements were careful, deliberate.
1978. Same concerns. Different auditor. Same result.
She handed Ruth the folder. Inside were 2 audit reports, each concluding that Dr. Aldrich's billing practices were within acceptable parameters.
These auditors reviewed the patient files in his office?
That's standard procedure.
The files he kept in his office, not the ones he donated to the university.
I don't follow.
Dr. Aldrich kept 2 sets of patient records. One set showed normal growth patterns, normal examinations. The other set, the one his estate donated to our archive, shows identical measurements for every child, the same numbers repeated across hundreds of files.
Donna removed her glasses and cleaned them slowly.
You're saying he showed the auditors one set of records and kept another?
I'm saying the records don't match, and I'm asking if anyone in this office ever noticed.
Mrs. Kemper, those audits were conducted by qualified professionals. If there had been irregularities...
There were irregularities. That's why they audited him twice. But both times, someone signed off that everything was fine.
Donna's expression didn't change, but her voice dropped.
I wasn't here in 1969. Or 1978.
Who was?
Donna hesitated. She glanced toward the door, then back at Ruth.
The director at the time was a man named Carl Whitmore. He retired in 1984.
Whitmore. There's a patient in Aldrich's files named Carol Ann Whitmore.
I wouldn't know about that.
Do you have a current address for Mr. Whitmore?
I'm not authorized to release personnel information.
Ruth stood. She placed her card on Donna's desk.
If you remember anything else, I'd appreciate a call.
She was halfway to the door when Donna spoke again.
Mrs. Kemper. Carl Whitmore is buried in Harmon County. He died in 1986. Same year Dr. Aldrich retired.
Ruth stopped walking.
I thought you should know.
Ruth spent the next 2 weeks in newspaper archives. The Harmon County Herald had published continuously since 1892, and the state library kept microfilm copies of every issue. She started with Carl Whitmore's obituary. Whitmore had been born in Harmon County in 1921. He'd worked for the state medical board for 31 years, retiring as director in 1984. He'd been married to Eleanor Whitmore, née Aldrich, sister of Dr. Harold Aldrich.
The director who approved both audits was the doctor's brother-in-law.
She scrolled forward through the archives. Whitmore's daughter Carol Ann appeared in the birth announcements, 1954. The same Carol Ann whose patient file showed identical measurements to every other child in Aldrich's records. The newspaper archives revealed more connections. Dr. Aldrich had served on the county health board from 1962 to 1986. Carl Whitmore had been appointed state medical board director in 1962. The same year, Ruth noted, that the identical patient measurements began appearing in Aldrich's files. Before 1962, the drawer files showed normal variations. After 1962, every child measured the same. Ruth constructed a timeline in her notebook. 1956. Aldrich opens practice, begins keeping normal records. 1962. Whitmore becomes state medical director. Aldrich's measurements standardize. 1969. First audit, cleared by Whitmore's office. 1978. Second audit, same result. 1984. Whitmore retires. 1986. Aldrich retires. 1987. Both men die within months of each other.
They stopped at the same time. Both of them. Like they knew.
Ruth returned to Harmon County on a Thursday morning. This time she went to the courthouse, where property records and death certificates were kept in a basement vault. The clerk was a young woman who didn't recognize her name or ask questions. Carl Whitmore's death certificate listed cause of death as heart failure. Dr. Harold Aldrich's, filed 6 months later, listed the same. Both men had been cremated. Both certificates were signed by the same county coroner, a man named Frank Doyle, who, according to the county directory, had held the position since 1958.
Dr. Aldrich, Mr. Whitmore, and the coroner, all in place for 30 years.
She photographed the certificates and asked the clerk where she might find Frank Doyle.
He's still at the funeral home on Elm Street, but he doesn't take visitors much anymore.
The Doyle Funeral Home was a Victorian house converted for its purpose. White clapboard with black shutters and a circular driveway. Ruth rang the bell and waited. A woman in her 30s answered. Frank Doyle's daughter, she explained, running the business now that her father was retired.
He's in the garden, but I should warn you, he has good days and bad days. Today isn't great.
I only have a few questions about records he signed.
Records?
Death certificates. Dr. Harold Aldrich and Carl Whitmore.
June Doyle's expression shifted. Not quite recognition, but something close to it.
Those are old files.
I'm an archivist. Old files are what I do.
June looked at her for a long moment, then stepped aside.
He's by the roses. Don't upset him.
Frank Doyle sat in a wooden chair beside a rose bed, a plaid blanket across his knees despite the mild weather. He was perhaps 80, with thin white hair and hands that trembled slightly as he pruned dead blooms from the bushes.
Don't get many visitors. June says you're asking about Harry.
Harry?
Dr. Aldrich. We called him Harry.
You knew him well?
Knew everyone well. That's what happens in a small town. You live here long enough, you bury everyone you know.
He dropped a withered rose into a basket at his feet.
You're from the university, the one that got his files.
Word travels.
It does. Pete Lundy called June last week. Said some woman was asking questions at the courthouse.
Mr. Doyle, I've been examining Dr. Aldrich's patient records. There are some irregularities I'm trying to understand.
Irregularities.
The growth measurements don't match what we'd expect, and the photographs...
Harry was a careful man, meticulous. If his records show something, there was a reason.
What reason would there be for every child in the county to measure exactly the same?
Frank's pruning shears stopped moving. He looked at her directly for the first time.
You're not asking the right question.
What's the right question?
The right question is why nobody asked before.
He resumed pruning. His hands had stopped trembling.
30 years Harry filed those reports. 30 years the state paid his claims. You think nobody noticed?
The audits were cleared by Carl Whitmore, Dr. Aldrich's brother-in-law.
Carl did what he was told.
Told by whom?
Frank set down his shears. He looked toward the house, where his daughter's silhouette was visible in a window.
You want to know why nobody ages in those files? Because Harry never saw those children.
He never.
He saw 43 of them. The real ones. The ones whose parents paid cash. Everyone else? Those were names on paper.
800 names.
800 names. 30 years. Every year, Harry billed the state for comprehensive examinations of children who didn't exist.
Ruth felt the ground shift beneath her.
And every year, the state paid.
That's insurance fraud. For 3 decades.
Is it fraud if everyone knows? The state medical board knew. The county health department knew. The insurance companies knew,
How could they know and not act?
because Harry wasn't keeping the money.
Frank pulled the blanket tighter around his knees. His eyes had gone distant.
I signed those death certificates. Harry and Carl, both. Natural causes. And they were natural, far as the bodies showed. But Harry told me, week before he died, that he'd kept records of everything. Said he wanted someone to find them eventually.
He wanted to be caught?
He wanted to be understood. There's a difference.
Understood for what?
That's not my story to tell. You want that answer, you talk to the families.
Ruth drove back to the university that night. She didn't sleep. Instead, she sat in the archive basement with the patient files spread across 3 tables, sorting them into categories. The 43 real patients, the 800 fabricated ones, the insurance claims, the billing records. By dawn, she'd found the pattern she'd missed before. The fabricated patients weren't random. They were clustered, same last names appearing multiple times, same addresses, same family groupings. She cross-referenced the names with county birth records. None of the fabricated children appeared in the official registry, but their parents did.
Families with no children. Billing the state for pediatric care.
She pulled the census records again. Harmon County's child population had been declining since 1960. Families were smaller. Young people were leaving. But Aldrich's patient rolls never shrank. Ruth made a list of the 43 real patients, the ones whose drawer files showed normal growth. She recognized one name immediately, Thomas Breslin, whose wife had hung up on her. She recognized another, David Nestor, whose grandmother had insisted everything was fine. The third name on her list made her stop writing. Carol Ann Whitmore, daughter of Carl Whitmore, the state medical director, niece of Dr. Harold Aldrich. Ruth pulled her file from both sets. The drawer file showed a healthy girl with normal measurements. The donated file showed the same standardized numbers as everyone else. But unlike the fabricated patients, Carol Ann was real. She appeared in birth records, school records, the county newspaper.
The real children got 2 files, one true, one false. Why?
Ruth found Carol Ann Whitmore in the Harmon County phone book. She'd married, taken a new name, Carol Ann Pfeiffer, but still lived on her family's property outside town. Ruth called from her office, expecting another hang-up.
I wondered when someone would call.
Mrs. Pfeiffer?
My uncle said someone would come eventually. He said the files would speak for themselves. But that wasn't really true. You need someone to translate.
You knew about the records?
I helped create them.
Every summer from 1962 until I left for college, Uncle Harold would set up the camera and I'd pose against the height chart. Different clothes, different hair. He'd change the name on the file afterward.
Ruth sounded opened on the receiver.
Mrs. Kemper, those 800 children in Uncle Harold's files, a lot of them have my face.
Ruth drove to the Pfeiffer farm that afternoon. Carol Ann met her at the end of a gravel driveway. A woman in her mid-30s wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. Unremarkable in every way except for the steadiness of her gaze.
I've been expecting this conversation for 20 years.
Why did you help him?
Because I was a child, and he was my uncle, and he told me we were helping people.
She led Ruth into a farmhouse kitchen, poured coffee without asking.
Uncle Harold wasn't stealing. Not the way you're thinking. Every dollar he billed went somewhere. I didn't understand where until I was older.
Where did it go?
To the families. The ones who couldn't afford doctors. The ones whose insurance wouldn't cover what they needed. You have to understand what Harmon County was like in the 60s. Farming was failing. Jobs were leaving. Half the families here couldn't pay for a doctor visit, let alone surgery or long-term care.
So Dr. Aldrich billed for children who didn't exist?
He billed the state insurance pool for routine pediatric visits. The payments went into an account he controlled. And whenever someone in the county needed medical care they couldn't afford, A child with a birth defect, a farmer with cancer, a mother with complications. Uncle Harold paid for it.
Out of the fraudulent claims.
Out of money the state would never have spent on us otherwise. You think insurance companies care about poor families in counties nobody's heard of?
Ruth didn't answer. She was thinking about the numbers. $1.4 million over 30 years.
He saved lives, Mrs. Kemper. I watched him do it.
The state medical board knew. Your father knew.
My father made it possible. He flagged the audits, made sure the right people signed off. When investigators came, Uncle Harold showed them the drawer files, the real ones, and everyone went home satisfied.
Everyone except the insurance companies.
The insurance companies were billing the state. The state was billing the federal government. Nobody's money was actually missing. It just went to a different line item than the accountants expected.
That's still fraud.
Carol Ann set down her coffee cup.
My cousin Ellie was born with a heart defect in 1967. Surgery cost more than her father made in 3 years. Uncle Harold paid for it. Ellie's 42 now, has 3 kids of her own. Is that fraud?
It's not what the money was supposed to be for.
The money wasn't supposed to be for anything. It would have sat in the government account until someone found a reason to spend it. Uncle Harold found a reason.
Ruth drove back to the university that night. She sat in her office with the door closed, her notes spread before her, and tried to construct what she knew into something coherent.
Aldrich bills the state for 800 fictional children. Whitmore approves the claims. The money goes to families who need medical care. For 30 years, everyone involved stays quiet because they're all benefiting, or at least no one's being hurt.
She stared at the photographs of identical children, the same face posed against the same height chart, year after year.
But why keep the fake records? Why not destroy them?
She remembered what Frank Doyle had said. Harry wanted to be understood. She remembered what Carol Ann had said. The files would speak for themselves.
He kept them as proof, not of the fraud, of the good it did.
The next morning, Ruth received a phone call from Donna Kramer at the State Medical Board.
Mrs. Kemper, I probably shouldn't be calling you.
But you are.
I found something in the old files. After you left, I started looking. There's a memo from 1984 when Carl Whitmore retired. It went to the board chairman.
What does it say?
It recommends that the Harmon County billing situation be allowed to conclude naturally upon the retirement of the involved parties. Those are the exact words.
The board knew.
The board knew in 1984, and they decided to let it end quietly rather than investigate.
Ruth closed her eyes.
Mrs. Kemper, that memo was signed by the board chairman. He's still alive. He's the lieutenant governor now.
Ruth assembled her evidence, the patient files, the billing records, the audit reports, the memo, her photographs of Aldrich's office and the drawer files. She typed a 17-page summary and sent copies to the state attorney general, the insurance commissioner, and 3 newspapers. Within a week, the attorney general's office called to schedule an interview. Within 2 weeks, investigators arrived at the university to examine the original files. Within a month, Ruth was served with a subpoena to testify before a grand jury. The lieutenant governor denied any knowledge of the billing arrangement. The state medical board released a statement calling the Aldrich case an isolated historical matter. The insurance commissioner announced an internal review. Ruth testified for 3 hours. She explained the duplicate files, the standardized measurements, the billing patterns. She described her visits to Harmon County, her conversations with Frank Doyle and Carol Ann Pfeiffer. She presented her calculations. $1.4 million over 30 years, distributed to families in need.
Mrs. Kemper, in your professional opinion, did Dr. Aldrich commit fraud?
He billed for services he didn't provide. By legal definition, yes.
And the money?
Went to medical care for people who couldn't afford it. Every dollar I could trace.
So he stole from the government to help his patients.
Ruth paused. The grand jury waited.
He redistributed money that would have gone nowhere. Whether that's theft depends on what you think money is for.
The grand jury declined to issue indictments. The statute of limitations had expired. The principal actors were dead. The state medical board announced reforms to its audit procedures. The lieutenant governor survived a brief scandal and won re-election. The insurance commissioner's internal review found no evidence of ongoing irregularities. Ruth received a letter from the Aldrich estate's attorney. The family was filing for a court order to seal the medical records, citing patient privacy concerns. The university's legal counsel recommended compliance.
They're going to bury it.
She stood in her archive basement, surrounded by files that documented 30 years of systematic fraud, or 30 years of quiet charity, depending on how you counted. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere in Harmon County, a woman named Ellie was alive because a doctor had cheated the system. On the day the court order arrived, Ruth drove to Harmon County one last time. She found Carol Ann Pfeiffer at the farmhouse, splitting firewood in the side yard.
I heard about the sealing order.
Your uncle's files will go into storage. No one will be allowed to access them without court permission.
That's probably for the best.
For the best?
Carol Ann set down her axe. She wiped her hands on her jeans.
Mrs. Kemper, you found the truth. You told the truth. But some truths are more useful buried.
He saved lives. That should be remembered.
It is remembered. Every family he helped remembers. Every child who grew up because of him remembers. They don't need a file in an archive to tell them what happened.
And what about the people who don't know? What about the system that let it happen?
The system didn't let it happen. The system ignored it because ignoring it was easier than stopping it. And now the system is sealing the records because remembering is harder than forgetting.
Ruth stood in the farmyard, the autumn wind pulling at her coat. She thought about the files waiting in her basement. 847 children who never existed. 43 who did. And a doctor who had spent 30 years gaming a broken system to help people no one else would help.
I'm going to write about this. Everything I found. The records might be sealed, but I can still tell the story.
And who's going to read it?
Someone. Eventually. Someone who wants to understand how a small-town doctor decided that helping people mattered more than following rules.
Carol Ann picked up her axe. She swung it into the chopping block and left it there.
Then write it true, Mrs. Kemper. All of it. The fraud and the mercy. Don't make him a hero. Don't make him a villain. Just make him what he was.
What was he?
Human. Doing what humans do when the system fails them.
Ruth drove home that night with her windows down, the cold air sharp in her lungs. The files would be sealed. The officials would be protected. The families would keep their secrets. But somewhere, in a university archive, in a box marked restricted, the evidence remained. 800 children who never aged, 43 who did, and one doctor who had decided that some rules were worth breaking. Ruth Kemper began writing the next morning. She didn't stop until she'd told the whole story.